The Center for Anna Maria Island has helped place more than 160 mini reefs all around the island, even on people's personal docks.
The problem has been camouflaged. More than 75% of all military sexual assaults are never even documented, like Jacob's case.
This wind and rain that you're seeing right now isn't even the biggest concern.
This is Tom Brady's 10th Super Bowl, but move over, Brady. Just how big? Well, here's the size of me compared to it. Many vets say there's a simple way to test if it's too hot to trot. They say to place your hand on the pavement for 7 seconds. If it's too hot for your hand, then it's too hot for your hound. And right here is where millions of gallons of that contaminated water is coming out of that pipe and down a canal into Tampa Bay.
It's about 100,000 bags of fertilizer dumped into Tampa Bay in this one location.
Fast forward 3 months later to now. This pipe that the Piney Point water once came out of has since been capped, but some fear its impact may just be beginning.
Just a year ago, there was no one here. Now it's some of the busiest times the island has ever seen.
So what is it that is drawing so many people to Anna Maria Island? Maybe it's the white sand. Or clear aqua water. Or maybe it's all the greenery and the old Florida feel.
And we have live team coverage. Our Mary O'Connell is getting reaction from people at the growing memorial for Gabby. But we begin tonight with our Wendi Lane and the search for any evidence.
Yeah, Wendy, every day there's been a new twist in this case, from Brian refusing to talk to police to Brian being reported missing to today when the FBI swarmed Brian Laundrie's home this morning. Just before 10 a.m., more than a dozen FBI agents rushed into the Laundrie home. Brian Laundrie's parents were escorted out of the home and put into a dark-colored van. The FBI took all kinds of equipment with them inside. This may just look like an old shell. It is. But it's being used to bring new life to an area of Tampa Bay. I'll show you how. This shell is part of 130,000 pounds of fossilized shells that are being scooped and bagged by Tampa Bay Watch volunteers like Rick Powell.
It's a day at the gym, and I get a lot more out of it emotionally than I would at the gym.
What do you get out of it emotionally?
The feeling that I'm making a difference.
A difference that these shell bags will make once they're put on a boat and taken out to the small historical island that is eroding from being next to a shipping canal. This is Whiskey Stump Key. Right here, you can see how far the water comes up. The shell bags are going to help protect the island from further erosion.
What these are going to do is establish a substrate for oysters to settle on.
Richard Radigan is the Oyster Shell Program Coordinator for Tampa Bay Watch. He says with the help of volunteers, they've put more than 700 artificial reefs and thousands of shell bags around the island to become a habitat for oysters that help clean the water and create a living barrier to protect the shoreline.
To maintain the whole estuary system, which maintains the whole life of Tampa Bay.
The island is a natural sanctuary for all kinds of creatures.
It's an important nesting ground for birds.
And helping the environment and wildlife is something that Powell says is worth every second.
Just being out in God's creation, floating with the tide, and just being one with nature does touch your soul.
In Hillsborough County, Wendi Lane, ABC Action News.
It's all new at 6. It's been called the Invisible War. There are an estimated 20,000 military sexual assaults a year, but many say an unfair way of reporting the crimes has led to silencing victims. And those who do come forward face retaliation.
Right now, there's a bill in Congress to change the decades-old process of reporting sexual crimes in the military. ABC Action News reporter Wendi Lane takes a deeper dive into this issue, the fight to fix it, and how one Bay Area survivor has found healing. But we want to warn you, parts of this story may be disturbing to hear.
It's my uniform, my dress uniform. In 1997, I joined the U.S. Army.
At 19, Jacob Manning dreamt of making the service a lifelong career.
My experience in the military, it started off wonderful.
After basic training, he was assigned to Fort Drum, New York. That's where things changed. Jacob says he was picked on because of his size.
They picked the weakest one out of the bunch. I was 120 pounds. I remember going down through the barracks, being invited to drink with the guys. You know, I was excited. Finally, I'm part of the group. I'm one of them.
But that night would change Jacob's life forever.
So I started drinking, and that's when I started feeling dizzy, like a drug. And then after a few moments, I started blacking out. And some of it I do remember, some of it I don't. I tried to move, but I couldn't move. And I still remember hearing their gruntings, their groanings. It was like they were laughing. And then I completely blacked out. I woke up very early the next morning. It was freezing cold. I was laying naked in a dumpster. And I started crawling out of the dumpster thinking, oh God, what happened to me? I still remember the blood, the bleeding, and just trying to clean myself up. I had been beat so bad. From that beating, I suffered from narcolepsy and seizures, and also the inability to have children.
Jacob says he went to his sergeant to report what happened.
And he looked at me, he says, you want to be known as gay? Do you want them to think you wanted it? And he was just like, are you saying something, or are you saying that you're gay? And I was like, no. He's like, then you're new to the unit. Just keep your mouth shut and move forward. My whole career went downhill.
Because of the brain injury, Jacob was medically discharged with full retirement.
I didn't know what to do, where to go. My whole life just turned down.
Jacob is not alone. According to the Department of Defense, there's an estimated 20,000 military sexual assaults a year. But in 2019, only 5,700 were reported to investigators, and only 383 of those went to trial. Of that, only 138 resulted in convictions. That's fewer than 1% of victims ever getting justice.
The problem has been camouflaged. More than 75% of all military sexual assaults are never even documented, like Jacob's case. And lawmakers say the military's way of reporting is unfair, making victims reluctant to come forward. But despite the lack of convictions, victims are reaching out for help.
MST, or military sexual trauma, is sexual assault or repeated threatening sexual harassment during military service.
Dr. Amber Hudspeth is one of 3 therapists solely devoted to military sexual trauma at James A. Haley Veterans Hospital in Tampa.
Sexual trauma, one of the things that always gets damaged is trust.
Haley VA says the number of veterans seeking treatment for military sexual trauma increased by more than 4% last year.
Increase in people being willing to say, like, I need help. This is something I'm struggling with.
She says the Me Too movement pushed military sexual trauma victims to come forward. Then things erupted after the murder of U.S. Army Specialist Vanessa Guillen.
I'm sick and tired of this happening.
Guillen's sister begging for change after news broke last year of the suspected sexual harassment and murder of the 20-year-old who was stationed at Fort Hood, Texas. Her body found dismembered 2 months after she went missing from base. The suspect, a fellow soldier.
It's a decades-long fight to get the military to take this aggressively.
For 30 years, Colonel Don Christensen has been a lawyer for military sexual assault victims.
If people could see what happens in a court, they would be shocked.
Now he runs a national organization called Protect Our Defenders that is dedicated to fighting for survivors and advocating for better laws to protect them.
One of the big issues with military sexual trauma and the lack of accountability is the way the military justice system works.
Right now, active duty soldiers who are victims of a sex crime report to their superior. Christensen says it's a conflict of interest because many times a superior doesn't want to face retribution for a crime happening under their command.
Unlike the civilian world where a prosecutor makes the decision whether or not to prosecute, in the military it's the commander.
The I Am Vanessa Guillen bill that is now in Congress would allow a third party to investigate the crime.
You need to have independent military prosecutors.
As for Jacob, like many MST victims, he turned to addiction to cope.
I was so angry, I didn't care about anything.
He says decades of severe depression from military sexual trauma drove him to his breaking point.
It was about 3.5 years ago. I really tried to kill myself. I pulled the trigger the first time and it misfired. 3 times it misfired on me, and then I just broke down crying.
At his lowest point, Jacob called a friend.
I was just in tears trying to find hope. And she told me there's hope. So I just turned to faith, turned to God and said, help me. And that's what changed my life.
Jacob now lives in Pasco County with his wife.
Help us to forgive those around us as you have forgiven us.
He says with his faith, he has found forgiveness.
Love and forgiveness. Because when you forgive somebody, it takes away their chance of hurting you anymore. No longer a victim, a survivor, someone who can move on. And it's only through Christ that I'm a survivor.
And he sees hope in a future where laws will protect our soldiers who have already given so much.
That all survivors can get help and a future that is bright for us, that will develop laws that will prevent military sexual trauma or any type of sexual assault.
In Tampa, Wendi Lane, ABC Action News.
Here at Doctors Hospital of Sarasota is where they had the first case of COVID-19 in the entire state. Now they have an extra layer of protection against it.
Meet Buffy, a 2-year-old yellow lab who is cute and social, but has a very important job that helps save lives. She's trained to sniff out COVID-19.
It gives us an opportunity to go beyond just asking the questions and taking the temperatures.
After hospital visitors go through the temperature check and initial COVID screening questions, Buffy sniffs the visitor. If she does not detect COVID, she passes the person by, like with these visitors. But if she detects COVID-19, she will lay down.
So right here in my hand is a deactivated sample of COVID-19. It's no longer contagious. I'm going to put it in my pocket and see how Buffy reacts to it.
Well, just last week, Buffy detected her first positive visitor who took a rapid test and learned they had COVID-19. Hospital staff say the extra level of protection helps to make sure the patients stay safe.
Sometimes people have it and they don't know it.
Buffy is 95% accurate at detecting COVID-19. She comes from Southeastern Guide Dogs, where she's been training for months. They're training other dogs to do the same. And here's why the dogs are so good at it. Humans have 6 million olfactory receptors, where labs like Buffy have 300 million. If you use an analogy involving sight, a human could see 1/3 of a mile away, just down the block, while a dog would be able to see 3,000 miles away. That's as far as Seattle.
It's amazing if you think about where you could potentially miss someone.
An amazing way to help stop the spread of COVID-19. In Sarasota, Wendi Lane, ABC Action News.